Hey,
Ew.
it is Monday, and it could be a mindful Monday for you. It could be a motivational Monday for you. But for us, it's the Monday
Monday
rundown. That's right.
rundown. What's
You
going
got
on, guys?
Winston Broderick over here in this square. You got Janelle Villiers here in this square. And we love our Monday rundowns because we get to talk about all the things we don't get to talk about on our Wednesday shows, which is normally around business. You guys send in some really great questions, and then we answer the questions about like all sorts of topics. And what I love about this is that we also look to other content creators and thought leaders about their ideas around the same question. And then so we all end up learning together. It's like a beautiful thing. Who doesn't like learning, right? If you're not learning, you're dying. Or if you're not growing, you're dying. Whatever the saying is. You know what I'm trying to say.
Say that. Say
that. So what is the question
right,
for today?
let's jump into today. There we go.
Why do we hate ourselves?
My God.
Well, all right then. All right, so we're here. Why do we hate ourselves? Probably because of something that was told to us before that made us feel like we have no value. And so that's why we hate ourselves. I'm thinking of like a student. I had a student once that was like, oh, there's actually a whole acronym for this that people use on text message. But she was like, I hate my life. And that's turned into FML, fuck my life, right?
I hate my life. Okay.
No, so I hate my life. People used to say that like all the time, like out loud, but I have now seen on text messages, people will put like FML, and that stands for fuck my life, which is kind of like the same idea. Yeah, I know. And it's just this idea. And again, I don't think it's because people don't even realize what they're saying out loud, which just makes me think like, what are you saying that I don't even hear what you're saying?
Yeah.
But it's something about they don't like their life. They don't like who they are. They're just very unhappy with their being. And to me, that's usually a result of messages that you have heard over time, probably something that has happened when you were younger. I mean, if you get me going, I'll start talking about shame-based thinking, because that's to me what it is, right? When you, in fact, there's an acronym for shame, which is self-hate at my expense. Is an acronym for shame. Self-hate at my expense. And so if you're thinking I am unlovable, I am unworthy, I am a mistake, right? All of that is self-hate, and all of that stems from messages that you heard when you were typically a kid in your home, that you just received a message and internalized it to mean that you're unlovable. I definitely talk a lot about this in my book. Go get it if you haven't already. I slept with a married man. Am I still a good person?
Please do.
Typically because people who are in shame-based thinking do one of three things. One, they self-sabotage. Two, they flirt with risky behavior. Self-sabotage and the risky behavior right there in the title. And three, they isolate or self-punish themselves by removing themselves from others because they believe that people will abandon them if they got to know who they really were. And so again, to me, I hear this question and I can't help but to think like, oh, this is shame-based thinking. And it comes from this. That's why we hate ourselves, because of some message that we received when we were younger, and it's just perpetuated until adulthood.
Okay. This definitely seems this. So I love a lot of what you said, and where I feel like this question was like a layered questions, because actually no, I think why we hate ourselves is based on what we say to ourselves. Now, why we say those things, I think what you said articulates that incredibly well, and maybe the reasons why many people say the negative things that they say to themselves. There's a woman I listen to, Esther Hicks, and she talks about this idea that we all are aware that life is supposed to be good for us. And when we are having the experience of it not being good, how we choose to interpret that is where, I guess, is where our misstep comes into place. So we have a poor experience, and what we tell ourselves that poor experience means about us isn't always, and if you think negative things about yourself because of the experience you have, that's not what that experience is supposed to teach you. and more importantly, the emotions we have around an experience. So her, and I won't get into, she has a lot of vernaculars and terminology, but she refers to our soul, our inner being, as who we truly are, and our emotions are is the way we interpret the world. So when you're having a certain emotion, that emotion is only there to teach you that that experience isn't the one you want. And then if you could interpret that to start having thoughts around what you would want, and only focus on then what you would want to happen, and not take that moment and turn it into something bigger and negative, more, or larger than what it is, you'd have a better you would be able to have a better experience in the future. But what we tend to do is to look at our poor experience and make it mean something negative about us. And that, now when you perpetuate it, and I feel like that's what you're also describing. When we then allow that to continue to perpetuate itself, we find ourselves creating this idea that we don't love ourselves, or we aren't lovable. uh,
Right.
Many things could have happened to you, and that emotional response you had was accurate. But what we should have done was taken it and moved just towards what we want, instead of allowing it to become this thought pattern of, yeah, well, this always happens, and so on and so on and so on. And I know I'm not doing a great job, because I mean, you'd have to listen to a lot of her content for you to get all of what she's trying to explain. But as
Mhm.
at the crux of it is, we think poorly about ourselves because of the things we choose to say about ourselves. So I completely agree with you that it is our internal dialogue that I think supports this idea. And I get that people can tell me about experiences that they have, but again, many of those experiences you're seeing from a context that you already don't like yourself, and so you think you deserved whatever poor thing happened to you, and that's just not the way the world was set up. The world is set up for us to have good experiences. You will have poor experiences and ones you don't like in that as well, but you shouldn't make your life about the negative experience. Also have positive, and we've been talking about this, I think, but behind stage, like, life is a lot about dualities. And I feel like at times we've lost. I can speak for myself, actually. I know that I'm not always able to see it that way.
Mm.
I'm not always able to see um where something bad happening, a poor example may be, he missed the train because you thought you wanted to get to work on time, you missed the train. And little do you know, if something tragic doesn't happen with that train, in our minds, it's like, oh, well, nothing bad happened to the train. So all this is me being late. When you not getting there at a certain time could have actually allowed for you, if you had a different mindset about being late, to see someone, to meet a person, to something else that was actually a better experience for you. And so that's why you missed the train that morning. But for many of us, and I know I used to sit there, I would only sit on that train ride now, focusing on the fact that I missed the train
Mm.
earlier, and not see the thing that missing the train was there to show me. Because you spend the full ride now going, man, I'm late, I'm late, I'm late, I'm late, or late, or I hate when I'm late, I'm a terrible person because I'm late, da 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 da. And then what you're saying to yourself during that whole time now isn't what you should have been using this to do.
So I love that example because that puts it in like a very realistic and real time. Um, I'm gonna the why part, like why do we hate ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna dig into that a little bit deeper and also give an example. So these messages that we may have received when we were younger. Here's an
Mm-hmm.
example. When you were a kid, maybe you got all A's and one B, and your parents only focused on the B. Well, why didn't you get all A's, right? Like, what's wrong with
Wait, so
you?
your parents were Jamaican too?
Right,
Wow.
right. I know a lot of Caribbean parents,
Exactly.
not just
I know
not,
if
not
you're
Caribbean,
West Indian, yeah, I'm about to say,
Indians.
and that
I
was
have a
your
lot of Asian
experience, please
American
tell us
friends who
no.
also say the same thing.
Please let
My
us
Asian
know.
American friends, you're out there, South or East Asian, have experienced
Seriously.
similar things. So, but however, for some children, the message that they can receive from that, so I'm not going to say everyone, but some children, the message they receive is, oh, if I'm not perfect, then I'm not worthy of love or attention
Mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
affection. And so now it becomes, I've got to be perfect, or I've got to do everything right, or I've got it right. And if I don't, then I'm unlovable. And even secretly, like, I know I am never going to always get all A's, and so I am unlovable. Or what happens the one time you've been getting all A's and all of a sudden you don't, like you get an A minus. These like people literally implode, and it's because of a message they got when they were younger that like they have to be perfect in order to receive love. So that's just an example of how early the message can start and how it can develop later. Anyway,
into something else. Well, I think you hit on something. I think you hit on something there, because what you also identified is this idea that you know somewhere in your head that you can never be perfect. And so because you are aware of that, it almost feels like everything you do, you know, isn't that thing, because it's not perfection. Even the 100 doesn't even always feel like it was the highest grade you could have got. Because I don't know about you, but I've had exams that I've had that had extra credit and things like that. And I remember being told once, getting 100, and it was like, wasn't there an extra credit for this assignment? Couldn't you have done more? So there's this idea that you will never be enough. Mm-hmm. But who defined the enough is, I think, where we could start to look at healing, if that's the right terminology to use around that. It's like, who is the person you're letting define what enough is, or what it means for you to be enough? Because it has to be enough for something or one, and you may have identified it. For many of us, starting out is our parents. Go ahead.
We should link up the episode, because didn't we do an episode about child's work, when you work on your childhood? What is it called, to work on your inner child? Yeah.
There was one. I think that we did see that. Yeah. We'll find it after this one and put it up for you guys.
Yeah.
All right, so who we got today?
We've got our friends at the School of Life. Shout out to the School of Life. If the producers ever end up seeing this show, you should just know that we love you, as does our audience. Absolutely. We love you. You are able to put into context so many complicated, nuanced concepts and just make them really simple for us to understand. And we love you for that. So we're going to listen to what the School of Life has to say about this question.
Let's do it.
What happens to a child who isn't loved properly? The answer one might expect is that they start to hate the person who doesn't give them the love they need. But far from it. The reality is that the child becomes filled with shame, a sense that it's profoundly unworthy, dirty, soiled, sinful, ugly, embarrassing. The child is unable to redirect the blame outwards. It doesn't ask, what's wrong with my parents for not loving me adequately? It simply wonders in a forlorn way, what have I done wrong in order to have ended up on the receiving end of my parents' disapproval? The child prefers to attack itself for being bad than to confront a yet more awful possibility that it's entirely dependent for its well-being on inadequate and unkind parental figures. The child searches for explanations for the lack of love it has to endure and comes up with all the wrong answers. It concludes, I've not been impressive enough, and therefore it undertakes enormous efforts to prove to itself and outsiders that it does, nevertheless, deserve to exist. At school, this kind of child might try 7 times as hard as any other to show that it's clever and good. Or else a child may go down an antisocial route and graffiti the nearby underpass as a desperate way of giving outward form to a feeling of badness it's tortured by inside. There is, so sadly, no way out from the burden of shame, available either by trying to be extremely good or extremely bad. The only solution is to work against the grain of forgetting in order to perceive, for the first time, an awful possibility that one could never perceive as a child, that one has done nothing wrong at all, that wrong was done to one.
Man, you know, again, this is just to give Esther Hicks would call that looking for love in all the wrong places. And what she means by that is just what they said. It's this idea that I think many of us, or maybe all of us, would think our parents are supposed to be, for many, the first example of unconditional love in this world. And yet we may not have the understanding of this until we are adults ourselves or parents. But I think maybe more just adults, that our parents are human beings as well. Actually, listening to you describe your parents from last time in the last episode with the whole pots and pans, with the plates, excuse me, and the kitchen sink thing, makes me realize that and I don't know how long you've been here, but you at least gotten to a place in life where you could see your parents as human and not just these parental figures in your life who are infallible, can't make mistakes. And many of us don't get to that place until years later, where you realize that for many parents who are young, like they were in their 20s trying to figure this out. I remember thinking about that. Like my mom was in her 20s. I didn't have a child until I was in my 30s. And in my head, I'm like, I couldn't have done this until like I couldn't have did this when I was 20. Like to be that responsible to deal with someone else. And knowing a lot of the things that I had to go through, emotionally in my 20s, to have the responsibility of having to, and just like how people describe what it means to be a parent, it's like you got to forget your own life and only focus on the child. And in my head, it's like, but no one really does that. It's like if you're in an angry relationship, your kid sees that. If if the relationship you guys are presenting isn't a good one, or if one person isn't happy, like kids pick up on those things, even if we may not be aware that they are aware about that. I mean, actually, you know this better than anyone else. They talk about what a baby deals with, feels or experiences when a mother doesn't have like the best experience while she's pregnant. If she has to go through some stressful things, how all of those things are taken onto the child. Like, so I know that this subject is one where, like I said earlier, there's a lot of layers in this one.
I love how you're coming at it from the adult side, because I think that's important. And I'm just going to reiterate what they said about the kid side, and that like as children, even as infants, I would say, if you're not receiving that love, your child brain only looks at self. It's a very selfish way of being at that point. You don't see others at all. But that is the development stage of a child, is that they're like, oh, it must be me. And that so number one, it's normal for a child to want love. Like that's a normal thing. That's just like normal for humans. That is like what it is.
Say, yeah.
And number two, when a child doesn't receive it, then it figures out reasons why it's them. Like they must be the reason. Mommy and daddy are fighting because of me, right? Like I must be the reason. Something's wrong with me. If I were good, they wouldn't fight this way, right? Like if I were good, they wouldn't treat me this way in front of other people, or whatever it is, right? Like there's so many examples of the messages that you could have received when you were younger. And so I just want to normalize, which is why the inner child work is so important.
Yeah.
Because these are,
what's
not until you're an adult that you can really see it. But the message that you received as a kid, and again, you were a kid, so you couldn't really do it any other way. And yet here we are as an adult still thinking that way. And so as an adult,
you're making it into a thing.
Try and look at it in a different light. But if you're not aware, like if you don't even know that this is what's going on, you just kind of like living life self-sabotaging, like right, being bad, or like trying to aim at this perfectionism thing, which
you'll find out you can never reach. Yeah. It almost feels like you're just turning your wheels. What you just said makes me think of, I remember my sister and her ex-husband were going through, and I don't remember what stage this was, but my niece, and she had to be younger than Norman, and I was talking to her, and it was so fascinating because she said she was aware enough at this young age to make this statement: I wish I was still a baby. And I said, why? And she goes, because when I was if I was a baby, my parents wouldn't want to not be together. And so what she did was she turned her getting older and maybe her parents, what they were going through, as because I'm getting older and this is causing my parents the type of challenges that now they don't want to be together. But when I was younger, to your point about that self-perception, things were this way. Therefore, if I could go back to being this way, so she would do things like blah, 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 and talk like that when she was clearly at an age where she no longer needed to do that. So her mind was saying, if I act a certain way, then this outcome will come from this.
Yeah.
And we do that even, and we use the term adults, I'm going to use that term quite loosely, because we can maybe a certain age, but can have childlike behaviors when it comes to certain, and maybe not triggers, but experiences can put you in a very, you may respond like that child version of yourself did, because you've not yet learned to not make that experience that you had wasn't about you. Again, when it comes to parents, it's hard to see that. I know I've gone through things that have nothing to do with my kids, but to your point, they only know that it's about them, so they don't get that. You know, they don't understand that, oh, this isn't, my dad isn't mad because of this thing. My dad's upset because his bank account's right here right now, and so me asking him about buying whatever isn't about me. It's about how he feels about his financial situation. But how it comes off to me is him saying, no, you can't have that. So it must be now something I did why I can't have that. Because many of us didn't have parents who said, hey, financially things aren't the way I would like them to be right now, so that's why I can't get it. We were told just very surface responses, and so you had to go figure it out or create something that would make it make sense to you. You know what I mean? Because like, if we have money and we're buying food, in a kid's mind, it's like, why can't we have this as well? When it's, well, the food is important and the finances aren't there to go get this other thing right now, and the kid won't understand that because the parent's not having that conversation with their kid.
Right.
You know? So I think it behooves us as this new generation to have more. That's why we have this show, guys. Have not difficult. Have the conversation. Have the conversations that you feel you didn't have as a child with your friends, family, whoever. Have those conversations. Many of us probably even have friends that we would have wanted to have different conversations as growing up, and we didn't have them. You know?
Well, that's a great message as we wrap up for today. Yeah. Go ahead and have those uncomfortable conversations. That's another great episode, Uncomfortable Conversations. Actually, this has been amazing. Yeah. We can't wait to see you next week. We can't wait to hear what questions you're going to bring our way. Keep them coming. Don't forget to subscribe, like, all the things, ring the notification bell. But until next week, as always, remember that you deserve the good life. Say that.
Say that. We'll see you guys.